Well, you've probably swiped that credit card a bunch of times over the past several weeks with the holidays. Well, now that the shopping season has come to an end, it's time to look at those bills that are probably coming in the mail, and some of the bills could be pretty big. So with the new year, how do you manage to get out of debt and quickly? Joining us now with some tips is Bill Bartmann, who's the CEO of Bartmann Enterprises, and he's the former CEO of Commercial Financial Services. Good to see you, Bill. Thanks for coming in. And this is something that affects a lot of people out there. These bills are coming, and I imagine that there are some people out there who probably already had debt to begin with before the shopping season. What do they do? I know that one of your tips is to stop paying all of your bills.
Well, good afternoon and good to see you again. And yes, that is one of my tips. And it sounds unconventional. In fact, it almost sounds un-American to be telling people to not pay their bills. But honestly, in this time, in this recession, and this economy, we have a lot of people who are so far underwater that, quite frankly, most of them aren't going to see up again for a very, very long time. And one of the tips they can do, and again, it's unconventional, it will hurt your credit, but quite frankly, if you're already that far underwater, your credit's already been hurt. One of the things you can do is not pay your credit card bill. Now, I know that sounds a bit like anarchy, but here's the way it works. If you don't pay your credit card bill, after it goes 180 days delinquent, typically the credit card company will sell your debt, your credit card debt, to people who will pay as little as a nickel on the dollar. Now, once those people who purchase it for a nickel on the dollar contact you, they're happy to settle with you for 10 or 15 cents on the dollar. So in concept, you could quit paying your bill, save that money, take care of your family, store some of that money up, wait for these people to call you, settle the debt in full for 10, 15 cents on the dollar. Now, the only negative would be, obviously, you would have tarnished your credit in the process.
And how long does it take? I mean, if you do that, how long would it take to get your credit ratings back up to, a reasonable level so that if you ever needed to borrow any money, you'd be able to do it?
Well, no, that clearly is one of the consequences. And it could take as long as 2 or 3 years to get your credit back to where it formerly had been. So if there's any way to avoid this, obviously you should avoid this. But if you're one of those people who just are staring either at bankruptcy or not feeding your children, this becomes one of the alternatives that we as a country are having to look at in 2010.
All right, so let's talk about things. First of all, I guess we could recommend stop using the credit card. That would be probably job one. But if you find yourself in this kind of a situation, another tip that you offer is, you mentioned, is to file for bankruptcy. Who would look into that as a viable option here?
Well, again, anyone who is so far in that they can't see out, and that becomes obviously a kind of a loose definition, but anybody who can look into the future and say, if I continue to make the kind of type of money that I'm earning presently, I am not going to get out of the hole that I'm in. And if you're in that kind of a situation, then that you are the kind of type of people for whom the bankruptcy code was written. The problem is really a fundamental one. When you're upside down in debt, you either have to earn more revenue or you have to reduce your expenses. Now, earning more revenue is easier said than done, obviously, and I tell people there are 6 things you can do, or almost anyone can do. Number 1, you could marry rich, but not very many of us can get away with that. And number 2, you could win the lottery, and not very many of us are going to get away with that one.
Right.
And number 3, we could have a rich relative die. Well, most of us don't have rich relatives. That leaves us down to 4, 5, and 6, which means we either have to earn more money at a regular job, or we have to get another part-time job, or maybe we have to trade in the old job and go do something that would be more fruitful. Now, that's one side of the equation. If you can't do any of those, then yes, you have to learn how to quit spending quite as much as you've been in the past. And one of the things that the gambling casinos in Las Vegas learned many, many years ago is that if you let people use chips instead of cash, they will spend a lot more. Well, the credit card companies learned the same thing. Yep. So maybe we should unlearn that.
One of the things that you recommend for folks who might not be in so dire circumstances that they need to look into filing for bankruptcy, but who are still having problems nonetheless, is to look into changing the deductible on some insurance policies that you hold. That could help out, right? That could raise some cash.
Absolutely. We can look at our entire life, and we should look at our entire life. Whatever we were doing caused us to get to where we're at, which means we need to go back now into these new times and reevaluate everything, including the amount of insurance we have on our automobile, the kind of type of insurance we have on our house. Every expense should be looked at to see, could I raise the deductible and therefore lower the premium, and would that extra money be a risk worth taking? And in many cases, the answer will be yes, it is a risk, but it's a risk worth taking.
Also, we can sell some things. It's another thing that you recommend. If we've accumulated and bought so many items, maybe we could sort of sell them off and at least get some cash back that way.
Well, absolutely. Well, we know goldfish and other animals, they grow to the size of their environment. Well, people grow to the size of their environment. And when times were good a few years ago, and it really wasn't all that long ago, we all learned how to live, as they say, high on the hog. We learned how to live in a life where we spent most of the money we made. Well, sadly now we're not making as much as we used to, but yet our expenses continue to be pretty much what they used to be. And they can't. You can't have that out of balance. So
right.
We have to find ways to not spend as much as we did. And,
well, I think
maybe
this
it's as simple as looking at your closet.
And then get rid of some of those things that you bought that you now find yourself you don't need. Great advice, and unfortunately there are an awful lot of people out there who I'm sure were hanging on in your every word, trying to figure out a way out of their situation. Bill Bartmann, who's the CEO of Bartmann Enterprises, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
A lot of tips you wouldn't think of there. If you have any extra ties, I know my husband admires this. I'm just teasing. I hope everybody can find a way out.